What if I told you some of India's most mysterious ancient ruins aren't buried deep in the jungle but right under people's noses? Places millions walk past every day, without realizing they're standing on the bones of lost kingdoms, vanished cities, and temples older than history books even admit? This isn't just another ancient India story. This is about ruins so strange, so old, and so ignored that even local people sometimes forget they're real. From crumbling stone cities older than the pyramids to sacred temples swallowed by forests, we're diving deep into the forgotten world of India's ancient ruins. Ruins hiding in plain sight. India's got history, no doubt. But while most people think of the Taj Mahal or big-name temples, they forget something. So much of India's past has been lost, or worse, ignored. Some ruins are too remote, others are covered in modern towns, and some are just sitting out there, misunderstood or dismissed. Because they don't fit the usual story. They're not on tourist maps, they're not in school books. And nobody's really asking, why are these places abandoned? Who built them? And what are we still missing? This video is about those places. The ruins nobody's talking about. The ancient structures sitting right there in the open, blending into cities, villages, and jungles. Places that hold secrets about ancient science, lost trade, forgotten gods, and vanished cultures. You'll want to see these for yourself. Maluti temples, Jharkhand's hidden marvel. Let's start in a tiny village most Indians have never heard of, Maluti, in Jharkhand. This place has over 70 terracotta temples. Yes, 70. Built hundreds of years ago by the Baj Basanta royal family. These temples are packed with carvings of demons, goddesses, battle scenes, and tantric symbols. But here's the thing, no one's maintaining them. No big tourist boards, no crowds. Some are literally being eaten by moss and cows. Locals walk past these temples like they're just regular walls. But archaeologists say these temples could hold clues to lost regional kingdoms and folk traditions that never made it into mainstream Hinduism. Why have these temples been ignored? Maybe because they're not flashy, maybe because they're rural, or maybe, just maybe, because their stories don't match the neat version of Indian history we're used to hearing. Bhangar Fort, Rajasthan's haunted ghost town. Everyone calls it haunted, but nobody talks about the bigger mystery. Why was Bhangar Fort abandoned? Bhangar was once a booming town, palaces, temples, markets, you name it. But then, nothing. People left, entire buildings fell apart, legends blame curses, locals still say spirits wander at night. But here's a bigger question. Why did such a well-planned fort town suddenly die out? Historians suggest it was war, or famine. But the strange thing is, records just stop. And the ruins? They're still there, just lying in the open with barely any deep study into what really happened. It's more than a spooky site. It's a lost chapter of Rajasthani history. Chandraketugarh, Bengal's forgotten city near Kolkata, lies the ruins of Chandraketugarh, an ancient city older than most empires. Archaeologists found coins, pottery, and seals here that hint at trade with Rome, Mesopotamia, and China. Yes, you heard that right. Bengal was part of a massive ancient trade network. But this city, it's not in most textbooks. Why? Because excavation has been slow. And honestly, there's just not enough attention. But this city could rewrite how we understand ancient Indian trade, culture, and power. It's not hidden in the forest. It's in the open. Just forgotten. Kangra Fort, overshadowed by time. Kangra Fort in Himachal Pradesh is one of the largest and oldest forts in India. Older than the Mughal Empire. Older than the Delhi Sultanate. Maybe even older than Ashoka. But most people don't visit it. Why? Because it's not on the big tourist trail, and yet this fort has stood through over 20 invasions, earthquakes, and dynasties. Its walls still whisper stories of war, strategy, and resilience. Imagine if this fort were in Europe. It would be a national icon. Lothal, the vanished port city. Let's jump way back to the Indus Valley civilization. Everyone knows about Mohenjo-daro, but not many talk about Lothal in Gujarat. Why is Lothal important? It had one of the world's earliest dockyards. That's right. This ancient city was doing international maritime trade over 4,000 years ago, but today, it sits quietly with almost no signage surrounded by farmland. Some people drive past it without realizing they're next to one of the earliest urban port cities in the world. Bateshwar temples, 200 forgotten shrines. In Madhya Pradesh, there's a place called Bateshwar, a cluster of over 200 stone temples, most of them in ruins. Here's what's wild. These temples were rediscovered not by a scholar but by a police officer. Yes, ASI officer KK Muhammad helped restore dozens of them after chasing out illegal miners. The temples are now back from the brink, but still relatively unknown. These temples date back to the 8th-10th centuries and were built during the Gurjara Pratihara dynasty, which nobody seems to talk about anymore. Surang Tila, mysterious temple on a raised platform. In Chhattisgarh lies a weirdly well-planned, symmetrical temple called Surang Tila. Built with massive white stone blocks, this 2,000-year-old structure has no inscriptions, no records, and no clear explanation of why it was built the way it was. It also survived massive earthquakes. Some think the platform was built to resist tremors, which suggests ancient engineers understood seismic safety. That's next-level thinking. Why don't we hear more about this? Because the temple was buried until recent excavations. And even now, it's just not in the spotlight. Una Koti, carved into a mountain. Una Koti in Tripura is just strange. There's a giant Shiva face carved into a mountain 30 feet tall, plus dozens of smaller carvings and figures all etched into rock faces and boulders in the jungle. But here's the kicker. No one knows who made them, or why. Some say it's 1,000 years old, others say more, but there's no inscriptions, no buildings, no town, just this giant stone gallery in the forest. Una Koti means one less than a crore, and legend says 99,999 gods stopped here on their way to Kashi. But none of that explains the art, the mystery, or why it's been ignored. Burzahom, Neolithic life in Kashmir. Let's go north, really north. In Kashmir, near Srinagar, is a place called Burzahom, a Neolithic site. Yeah, that means people were living here with tools and pets more than 5,000 years ago. They lived in pit houses, they made art, they buried their dead with animals. This place shows that people in Kashmir weren't just part of ancient Indian history. They were doing their own thing in their own way. But Burzahom barely gets a mention in national conversations. All these ruins have something in common. They're ancient, important, and ignored. It's almost like these places are too inconvenient for mainstream history. They're too far out, too mysterious, or too hard to explain. They don't fit the tidy timelines or political narratives. But they exist. And they're waiting for people like you, curious explorers, to ask the real questions. Why did these places fall into silence? What stories were erased? And what would we find if we looked beyond the usual tourist guides? India is full of ancient sites, but the ones that matter most aren't always the ones in brochures. The real story of India's past might be hiding in broken walls, moss-covered statues, or temples forgotten by time. These ruins aren't just old stones, they're evidence, proof of civilizations that shaped the world and then disappeared from the spotlight. Maybe it's time we paid attention. Watch the next video to discover even more secrets that history books forgot.